Never ends, does it, in as far as the Gauteng Department of Health and monies are concerned. The Gauteng hospitals have paid service providers nearly 400 million rand over the last 3 years. Now, some have questioned these payments, whether services were actually rendered and possible corruption or fraudulent activity. This after reports that this money was paid to approximately 12 companies, all linked to Angwani Morgan Maumera, who is President Cyril Ramaphosa's distant nephew. Executive Director at Corruption Watch, Karam Singh, joins me now to discuss this issue further. So this revelation around Mr. Maumela, Karam, is the latest in what is turning out to be a sordid saga, really, in as far as the finances and the handling of tenders in the Department of Health in Gauteng, especially Tembisa Hospital, because some of those actually relate directly to Tembisa Hospital. What's your initial sense around this, these latest revelations and the links, albeit distant, to President Cyril Ramaphosa?
Good morning, and thanks for having me on the program. Yeah, I mean, this story has been in the public domain for a long time. We know that, across the country, that departments of health have been vulnerable to corruption. We've seen this particularly in the Gauteng province, and as you've noted, particularly now, the revelations relating to the Tembisa Hospital. We know that Babita Deokaran was assassinated as a whistleblower who had given information to an ongoing SIU investigation. And, as the allegations come out and you see the allegations of, significant amounts of money, hundreds of millions of rands going to one company in suspicious circumstances in terms of alleged irregular procurement, that it's an absolute concern, absolute abomination, really, in a situation where we have declining health standards and declining health infrastructure. We know that these are a direct result of these corrupt transactions. As for the potential or the established relationship to the president, that is obviously a curious aspect to this story. And I think it's obviously something that the investigators would look at to see whether, that there's any link then under a kind of through connections or through cronyisms that the political influence that these individuals were able to leverage were linked to their political and personal connections. And I think that's something that the investigations will still need to uncover.
Does it, in your view, Karam, because, while we talk about this person who is a nephew by marriage to President Cyril Ramaphosa, and hence the qualifier distant, but is it important for us, and tell us why it is, that we should continue to highlight that in the scheme of things where influence peddling and name dropping to influence decisions of decision makers is an actual phenomenon in this country?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And we've seen this, repeatedly. We definitely have seen that in the SIU investigations into Gauteng Health. And we saw it also in the various scandals relating to PPE. We know that there's this notion of politically exposed persons, people that have links to powerful politicians. And as you say, they're able to use those names to influence peddle and to get these irregular deals. This is part of the the cancer that's at our body politic that characterizes the way corruption happens and the way corrupt transactions happen through cronyism and through political connections. So we need to flag it. The questions need to be put to the various people that are alleged to have done the wrongdoing and their political connections, and they need to give us clear answers about the relationship and what they may have known prior to people being awarded these contracts.
Yeah, and directly then, what does President Ramaphosa do with this? Does he sit back and say, look, this person is a nephew of mine by marriage, which is a distant relationship. I'm not involved in any way. Or does he then address it and say, if I'm trying to get South Africans to rally behind me when I say I'm fighting corruption, and I can show you how I'm fighting corruption, it is important that I should address this, no matter how thin the bloodline is?
I think it's the latter of what you said. I mean, if we want to take the president and trust him and believe in his bona fides in the fight against corruption, whenever allegations like these emerge, and there are other connections that are coming out in the press that that this individual could be linked to Benjani Choke, whose name comes up in the Fraser affidavit as someone that's closely linked to the president. So, when these allegations emerge, the president should take us into his confidence and should dispel any notion that there's any wrongdoing linked to friendship or linked to family, because those allegations hurt, I think, the president and hurt the trust that we broadly have in him and his bona fides to lead the fight against corruption.
Lastly, Karam, we saw a change of guard in the leadership of Gauteng in terms of government. New Premier, new MEC for Health just a couple of weeks ago. Early days yet, but the new leadership came in with some strong promises on stamping out these issues, including acting on some of what people like the late Babita Deokaran were exposing. Your sense, are we likely to really see, actual political will, or are we even starting to see that, or is it still early days?
I think it's still early days. I think the outgoing leadership in Gauteng also made appropriate noises about their commitment to the fight against corruption. And it didn't stop, serious allegations emerging, particularly from the Department of Health. I mean, there are allegations that have come from, historically, from the Department of Education, where the new premier comes from, in terms of irregular spending, fogging of classrooms during COVID, which was not necessary. And we never received a full response or full disclosures around those allegations. So I think the new leadership, we appreciate them making the right anti-corruption noises, the right messaging, but it's early days and we'll have to judge them on their actual record. And as you spoke about earlier, the actual implementation of policies and ensuring that there's accountability and consequence management, and that when people are implicated with serious allegations, that they're asked to step aside.
Yeah, I've got to thank you for your time and your insights here on All Angles. Karam Singh is from Corruption Watch, weighing in there on that story around the flow of monies, right, in the Department of Health in Gauteng, including the infamous Tembisa Hospital.